Welcome, everyone, to the Believe in Bengal podcast delivered by 828 Logistics. I'm Solomon Wilcots. And right now, of course, this is our third episode where we are going to preview the soon-to-be released book, From Bulldog to Bengal. That's right. It's the story of Joe Burrow through the eyes of his hometown and the great people in Athens, Ohio. And joining me right now is one of the co-authors, Scott Burson, and none other than, that's right, Joe Burrow's father, Jimmy Burrow, joining us here on the Believe in Bengal podcast. Guys, how you doing today?
Yeah, doing great.
Thanks for having us on, and looking forward to our conversation.
Well, Jimmy, look, I know you're coming to us. You're in your car. You're helping your parents down there in Mississippi, and I know that the tornado that came through did some damage down there. So we wish your parents well. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and with you as you sort of walk them through this. Are you going to be okay?
Yeah, I'm going to be okay. We're Mississippi tough down here. My parents are 93 and 92. The house got damaged, and who knows if we can get it fixed. But they were in the storm cellar. They're safe. The town is a disaster area, but everybody's pitching in and really helping out, and it's part of life that you have to deal with, and but we're there to help. So it's been good to at least be able to be there and help my parents and the people of Amory.
Well, it's not lost on me, and I think Scott did a really good job of depicting this in the book and telling the story of how you grew up in Mississippi. You grew up an athlete. You got to play baseball, basketball, and football. But it's your mom who kind of stole the show, right? Holding the state record with 80-plus points scored in a basketball game. So I understand that you got all that great athletic ability from your mom. Is that correct?
Well, she would tell you that for sure. and that's probably more true than not. But my dad played basketball at Mississippi State also. So there was a lot of good basketball athletic genes in the family. But my mom was a legendary basketball player in North Mississippi. They didn't really have women's college basketball in the down south here at the time, so she didn't continue to play. But yeah, it's fun to read the old scrapbooks.
Yeah, I bet as we're watching the NCAA tournament, the women's version, your mom can sit back and watch those games and think what could have been, because she was certainly a talent. Scott also depicted in the book, of course, of how the town of Athens really shaped the upbringing of one Joe Burrow. And this thing is growing into folklore, all the wonderful things that he's accomplished early in his life. And a lot of it starts right there in Athens, Ohio. And what took you there is, of course, you were coaching college football there. Just kind of talk to us about the story. I know it's depicted in the book, but just how you ended up in Athens and how it came to be that you end up staying there despite getting job offers to leave.
Well, Joe was born in Ames, Iowa. I had been coaching at Iowa State, and then eventually became the head football coach at the high school, Ames High in Iowa. Wanted to get back into to college sports, and so I had gotten to go with Coach Solich at Nebraska, and spent a couple years there, and then went with Craig Bold to Fargo, North Dakota, and then decided that when Coach Solich took that job at Ohio University, that's what I wanted to do. So I think we moved there. Joe was second grade. He came in spring break, and as Scott and Sam Smathers have talked about in the book, the rest is history, and Sam had a lot to do with it. So that's how we ended up in Athens, Ohio. And yes, we loved it there. Joe really didn't ever want us to leave. I had a few job opportunities, looked into a few things, but we decided to make that our home, and we're still living there.
And Scott, I want to bring you in here real quick, because you made it a point to really depict great storytelling, by the way, of how when Jimmy was offered a job, and then, of course, that one didn't work out, and he went and told, you wrote about this in the book, that he went and told Joe that it didn't happen, and Joe said, good. You made sure to get that in the book that Joe, that was his way of sort of voicing the approval that they were going to be staying. Why was that very important to you?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy told me that story, and I just thought it was a great anecdote that he'd had various job interviews along the way and opportunities, but Ames, as Jimmy just said, is where Joe was born, and they'd spent time there at Iowa State, and so that would have been an attractive option. And so I think Jimmy, you had said that you got a phone call in the car and you went inside and Joe was warming up for maybe I think it was a basketball game, right? And you walked by as he was shooting and said, didn't get the job. And he just said, good. And it's yeah.
I forget where it was, but he was warming up in the layup line. And I just passed by underneath the basket. And I said, we're not going to Iowa State. And that I didn't get the job. And he said, good. So I kind of figured that that's what he wanted, but he knew that might be a great opportunity for me to get back into the the Power Five conference at the time, and that was the last time I ever even reached out for another job. I think until even later. But that's where he wanted to be. That's Joe's home, and we're there for good.
And Scott, I want to go back to you because I think you tie it in very well that Athens was a community that it sort of offers what I think Jimmy just talked about. Their sacrifice. Everyone's sacrificing for one another. And these group of kids that came up with Joe, that played sports with him across, whether it was basketball, baseball, or football, that the community always pulled for one another. It was very customary to put others first. And we see that story as a theme throughout the book.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe, got acclimated, to Athens through sports. And I think it was Tom Vanderven, who's a sociologist at OU, who made this observation that sports became family and community for Joe from a very young age. So for him, everywhere he goes, these guys in the locker room aren't just coworkers. I mean, they're family. And this is just, it all started in Athens. Would you agree with that, Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, that was the way Joe got to know his friends that are still to this day his friends. Our first thing that he got involved in, I think, was what's called sandlot baseball. That's basically Little League baseball, and really that was his core group of friends that first summer. Then it became basketball and football, and those core friends. That was help. That was his special group of friends from the first summer, and still are to this day.
Now, Jimmy, look, you coached him in baseball and basketball and football, and while you were coaching your older boys, your two older sons, who were really good football players in their own right, they played on the defensive side. You were coaching college football on the defensive side, so you were watching film and studying. Joe became a student of the game, studying with you and his older brothers. And he learned to watch the game through that prism from the other side of the ball. He would ultimately go on to become a quarterback. But how would you say those early years of film study with you and with his older brothers, maybe even playing around the backyard, how did that all kind of shape the way that you see him playing the game today?
Well, he was too young to really watch his older brothers, but he certainly was around them enough that they said, hey, you got to be tough. It doesn't matter what position. And, he did want to play defense. He loved defense. And I think because I was on the defensive side as a coach and was a defensive coordinator, but coached the secondary and safeties, I think normally on a game that he would be watching of the Bobcats, or he would be trained in on my side of the ball, because that was how I was making a living. And so there were probably things that rubbed off that I sit every night and watch film with him. No, that didn't happen. But occasionally, we would I didn't get to see every game, so I'd say, hey, do you want to watch that game that I missed? And he would do it, and we might just talk a little coverage here and there. But Sam Smathers was his first coach, and then throughout his whole career to even now, he's had great coaches, and they should get most of the credit as far as teaching him how to do those type things. But some of it rubbed off, I'm sure.
Scott did a really good job in the book, just kind of talking about how he ended up walking away from baseball. I know that dream kind of died hard a little bit. Then he ended up really sort of focusing that football would be the sport for him. When did you know that football would be the sport, that quarterback would be the position? Because he was talented in all three sports. He could have thrived in either one that he had chosen. But when did you know that football would be the one and that quarterback would be the position he would settle into?
Well, there's still a lot of people in the area and in Athens that think baseball would have been his best sport, but he gave that up to concentrate on basketball and football. We thought he was going to be a basketball player because of his body type. He was tall and lean, could shoot the three, and was growing. And then 10th grade, when he became the starting quarterback, I'd seen a lot of things that kind of said, hey, I think he can play multiple sports if he chooses. But after that 10th grade season, you knew he was a quarterback, and you knew he had Division I potential. And even though he continued to play basketball and was all-state, his focus at that point was to be a Division I college football player.
And Scott, you wrote he kind of broke a lot of hearts. Like every coach wanted him, but I guess only one could ultimately have him, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the early stories that really convinced me that I thought this could be a great book was I was meeting with Fred Gibson. We call him Gibby back in Athens, but he was my basketball coach, my baseball coach back in the day. And he told me the story where Jimmy was throwing batting practice. He would just throw batting practice to Joe, when Joe was in elementary school, middle school. And he just kept hitting line drives back at you, Jimmy, right? And hitting you and putting bruises all over you. And Jimmy called Gibby and said, hey, I need some help here. I need some protection. And so, Gibby would go out to the high school field and put an L screen up and sit in the stands and watch. And Gibby thought, man, I got myself a star. I think it was in 8th grade. I got myself a star. So when he comes next year, he's going to start for me on varsity. And that's when Joe broke Gibby's heart and said, I think I'm going to be a D1 basketball player at this point. And then maybe, Jimmy, you could talk about Joe thinking about going back out for the baseball team his senior year.
I mean, probably thinking back, it possibly was his favorite sport. Travel baseball. He kind of wanted to be with his friends. And then after he committed to Ohio State, and I think Gibby reached back out and said, hey, if you want to play baseball again, you can. And he thought about it long and hard because he loved it. He loved being with his friends. And as I said, that same core group of friends that he met the first summer we moved to Athens was still playing baseball. And but he decided that no, and I agreed with the decision at that time because he was working to be ready to go to camp with Ohio State. I'd say if you ask Joe now, that's probably the one regret that he has in high school and sports, that he didn't go back out that spring. So again, it's worked out for the best, but he loved baseball and basketball for sure.
I got to tell you, I was just riveted to this book, just reading it and understanding this sense of place, of where Joe Burrow comes from, but more importantly, the parents, you and your wife, Robin, Joe's parents, and just what wonderful parents you guys are. Because all through it, I'm reading how you guys really allowed this space for him to make his own choices. You gave him direction, you gave him leadership, but you really did allow him to make his own choices. He always seemed to be very thoughtful and very understanding and communicating with you guys about what he wanted to do. And every step of the way, it's depicted in the book of how you guys gave him the space to do that. What can you tell us about that, Jimmy?
Well, he does. He seems to have always put thought into decision making, whether it was to transfer from Ohio State, to go to Ohio State, to give up baseball and those type things. And certainly, we gave him direction, and but he always wanted to make the decision himself. I'll give you a quick story on the Ohio State transfer. We had talked to different schools, and it became LSU Cincinnati, and everybody's is calling him. His mom and I were communicating all the time, and he said, "Hey, can you just make sure nobody gives me a call? I want to just make a decision here, but I want it all to myself for a week." I said, "Okay, Joe, we'll continue to your mom and I'll continue to call you at night just to see where you are with this." And he said, "No, Dad, that means everybody means you and your mom too. You and my mom. I don't want you guys calling me either for a week." Just bring him up to try to do the right thing and make good decisions and be there for him no matter what. And we certainly gave him advice along the way, but he was good at thinking things out on his own.
There's no doubt that this has been a wonderful story, and there's still more chapters to come. But along the way, there were setbacks. There were moments of disappointment. I think people need to understand that. And I think Scott and Sam do a really good job of depicting those in this book. You go back to the season 2015, 2016, 2017, 3 years on campus in Columbus at The Ohio State University. He's practicing, he's performing well in the spring games. When he does get in a game, he does play well. But you were coaching back in Athens. You were coaching college football. Robin is driving out to the games by herself. That had to be difficult because you guys are used to going together to all the games. Just kind of describe for us what those 3 years were like when maybe he wasn't getting the outcomes that he wanted, but he was still so very patient and continuing to work on his game during that period.
Well, it was a frustrating time for us, I think, as parents. We couldn't really do anything about it other than to be positive with it. We saw those spring games, and as a coach, I'm going, this guy's pretty good now to do, even though it's a spring game, and went to a few practices. But as I said, you just had to tell him to hang in there, be positive. And he's always loved competition. So I think he saw it as just another level to compete and to try to prove that he did belong there and that he could be a starter for Ohio State. But I think it was a tough time for him over those 3 years, but he developed so many great friends, and he graduated from Ohio State. So there's a lot of good memories for him there, but his decision to leave was well thought out by him, and the choices that he came up with and that we came up with were great choices. And I think once he went in to tell Coach Meyer that he was leaving, that was a relief to him, and he was just looking forward from that time on to choosing a place and competing again. Because nobody said, "Hey, you're the starting quarterback if you go here." Everybody said you're still going to have to compete, but he just saw it as a new opportunity. And as I said, he never backed away from competition and looked forward to it.
And Scott, I got to ask you about this because you clearly depicted in the book that Joe came through that period and it didn't scar him. There are a lot of young people would say, "Hey, I wasn't treated fairly." He clearly outplayed the competition in the spring games, but when things didn't break his way, he didn't hang his head. He didn't point fingers. And even when he gave the acceptance speech after winning the Heisman, he had good things to say about everyone back in Columbus at Ohio State. He was sitting with two of his former teammates there who are also Heisman Trophy finalists, but he seemed to always handle things and sort of handle it just the right way and still be able to go on and move on to achieve his goals. Why was that important that you capture that in the book?
Yeah, I think that is based on my research and everyone I talked to, that's Joe Burrow's character. And he's had it from a very young age. And I think Robin and Jimmy are a big part of that. But instead of hanging your heads, instead of making excuses, hey, let's move forward. How can we make the best of this? What is the best plan forward? And like you said, that week when he collected probably the most hardware in the history of college football, which culminated with the Heisman Trophy. I remember when he was down in Atlanta watching that acceptance speech, he said, "You know what? I wouldn't change a thing. What I went through helped make me into the person that I am today." And you see that, I think, with the Bengals, when he had his ACL, MCL, instead of,
Right.
In the book, I don't know if you've gotten that far yet, Solomon, but he has a conversation with the former trainer for the Bengals, who basically his philosophy was, all right, I let guys, kind of have their pity party for 24 hours. And then I say, hey, let's get on with it.
Oh.
Let's go. And Joe said, hey, no pouting here. Let's get on with it right now. So I think that's part of who Joe is and what makes him such a great leader.
And look, we can stay and tell a lot of stories. I wish I had more time, but I want to make sure that we get this story in, because I think Joe got it honest, because you tell a story about a young man playing for the University of Nebraska in a 1974, I think it was the Sugar Bowl against Florida. And he makes a play on the goal line. They get the goal line stand, and then the team goes on to go 99 yards for the game-winning touchdown. And that seems to epitomize a lot of the stories around the Burrow family. And that play was made by the guy who's on our screen, right? By one Jimmy Burrow, and he was playing collegiately at Nebraska. And Jimmy, just kind of help us to understand that story in context and how it really does epitomize that just because your back is up against the goal line, you can still make a play. You still got another 99 yards to go, but it can still get done.
Well, yeah, it was 4th and 1, and Coach Monty Kiffin was our defensive coordinator, became a great coordinator. And
I love Monty. Yeah.
and, one of my favorite guys and a mentor. And we were playing a wishbone team. I was covering a wide receiver, and he called basically a corner blitz, and I ran right into the pitch back out of the triple option and tackled him on the 1 yard line. The play, it's a lot better now than probably it was so many years ago. Joe's notoriety has brought that back out into the media. But it was a great night in New Orleans, and we did go 99 yards. Tony Davis, who played for the Bengals, had a great part in that. And then we kicked a couple field goals late, and we beat the University of Florida in the Sugar Bowl. So that's a great memory from a long time ago.
And somewhere Scott Frost has got to be kicking himself. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. He should have known better. He had good stock, right?
Well, Scott was a friend before that, or before the whole Joe deal, and still is a friend. And I've always, did I want him to go to Nebraska? Did we want him to go there? Absolutely. That's where my older sons, Jamie and Dan, played, and Joe learned to ride a bike at Memorial Stadium. But I've always respected coaches and their decision making, and whatever, whether it was Bo Pelini when Joe came out of high school, or Scott and the transfer. I'm sure they have their reasons, and they were committed to people on their team or people coming in, and it's all part of it. But as Joe would tell you, it's he wouldn't change anything for the world, and that experience at LSU, we're just glad it all played out like it did.
There is no doubt about it. And just one more thing before you go, because I think I read in the book that you said that Ed Orgeron helped change the direction of your lives as a family. I think either you said it or Joe said it, but what can you add to that?
Yeah. I mean, Coach Orgeron was a big reason. Bill Bush had set it all up as a recruiter and a coach there at LSU. But once we got down there, I think Joe was actually leaning maybe towards Cincinnati, because we all love Coach Fickle and some of the guys on that staff, but he had a vision, Coach O did, and he's a great recruiter, great salesperson. You kind of fall in love with him, and he did. He basically changed the Burrow family life forever with his commitment to Joe and Joe's commitment to him and LSU. And we still keep in touch with Coach O, and he's awesome, and LSU is awesome. And it was just it's something that we'll have great memories for the rest of our lives.
Well, Jimmy, we want to thank you for joining us on the Believe in Bengal podcast, and thank you for sharing the story of your family. I think it's a great American story, to be honest with you. Story of a great town in Athens, Ohio, and the story of you and your wife and your family, and some truly wonderful people like Scott and Sam and so many others who are mentioned in the book. It is a pleasure to be able to share many of these stories with our fans, and I think the Cincinnati Bengals fans are going to enjoy reading this book. And Scott, why don't you tell everyone where they can find the book when it's released, From Bulldog to Bengal, the story of Joe Burrow through the eyes of his hometown?
Yeah, it's coming out in a couple weeks. orangefraser.com. So orange, FRAZER.com. You can pre-order it now. You can also order it through Amazon if you have Prime. And so it'll be coming out in April.
And some of the proceeds from the book will go to benefit the Joe Burrow Foundation. So we want everyone to go out. You're going to be blessed by reading this book. We've certainly been blessed by hearing these great stories. We're running out of time, so we got to let you guys go. And Jimmy, hey, we wish your parents all the best. Let us know what we could do to help, if we could do anything. And we thank you guys for joining us on the show today. God bless you. We'll see you next week. We're going to be joined by Robin Burrow right here on the Believe in Bengal podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone.